Greetings. This episode of the LightCast is about the seasons of life and the relationship between our physical life, our physical body, and our spiritual and emotional bodies. And as part of that, I'm going to share the period of time when my inner fat boy was out and proud. So if that sounds interesting to you, stick around. This idea of conscious creator is just becoming aware that you can't not be. Of course you are. Like, I know that you're a spiritual being. Your spirituality is unique to you. It's specifically yours. And you're robbing all the rest of us from having the experience of you.
Yes.
Please don't rob us. What if you are one of those one rare beings that has something very different, very special, and very unique to bring into the world? Once you become like fully embodied, fully aware, fully focused, you make a difference. Consciousness underlies everything. You are a creator. You are participating in the creation of everything that you're experiencing. What are you going to do with that? So for the past few days, I have been eating a piece of honey wheat bread fried in avocado oil in a pan. And it is so good. Like, I'm so enjoying it. And for a number of reasons, I think my physical body is asking for that. Normally, I'm not a big bread person, not a big carb person, but it's cold here in North Texas, and I've been doing a fair amount of cardio on the treadmill, and I'm also doing some sort of brain-intensive stuff. And so at a certain point, my body starts asking for carbs. And so I'm honoring that and giving it what it's asking for. But I'm also not so much paying attention to how squeezable I am. So that got me to thinking about doing this episode to share some of the experiences I've had about being in this physical body and being a spiritual and emotional being in a physical body, and especially during different seasons of life for me. So here goes. And I think actually before I move into, I'm going to kind of talk about different seasons that I've experienced so far. But before I do that, I just want to remind us of from what perspective I'm sharing. Because, of course, everybody has a little bit different experience, but I think we can relate to each other in so many different ways. But just to kind of set the scene, I am a almost middle-aged man, and I grew up and live in north central Texas in the United States of America, where there's a certain cultural idea that I was exposed to. Growing up, it was clear to me that it was good and desirable to be physically attractive above all other attributes. It was a way that you could advance in society. It's a way for you to perceive or to be desirable to others, or at least for you to perceive that you're desirable to others. I can remember, like, I didn't know it at the time, but vanity is a sort of ingrained aspect of the culture of how I grew up. So I grew up knowing that I had to be, or operating as though I had to be aware of what I looked like. And I didn't actually ever think I was very attractive. I was quite critical of my looks. And I'm not really sure about all the dynamics that led to that, but it's just interesting to note. The other thing that I want to note is that because I identify as being attracted to men, there's a certain dynamic to that of living inside the thing that you're also attracted to, as opposed to those of us who identify as strongly heterosexual, you're attracted to the other thing more. And I'm certain that for most people, most men and most women, there's still a dynamic of being aware of the same sex, but it's a little bit different. If you're attracted to the thing that you live in, it kind of takes it to a heightened level, or there's an increased level of sensitivity about your physicality because of that dynamic. So let's use all of that to kind of set the scene about who you're hearing this message from. Again, probably anybody can relate to certain aspects of the conversation that's about to ensue, but it might be more applicable to those who are more along that line. Maybe, maybe not. Time will tell. But so I've kind of already suggested the first season of life for me, the relationship between me and my physical body, was this desire to look good and be perceived as attractive. And that was really the way I started with my sort of obsession of getting into the gym and working out. For a period of time in my 20s and early 30s, I worked out every single day, like 7 days a week. And I was very strict with my diet as well, kind of very disciplined, eating lots of clean meat and green vegetables. And I got results, ultimately. And also during that period of time, I was taking acting lessons and signed with an agency to be available for commercial acting and film and commercial modeling and all those kinds of things. And I met with some success in that environment, and I started getting some good feedback. So for me, I worked really hard during that season of life. It didn't feel like work. It didn't feel hard because it was inspired action. I had the attitude about it that it's what I wanted, and I was getting what I wanted, and I was going after it, and I did that. And it felt really good. I got good positive reinforcement from a lot of creative directors, photographers, stylists. That realm, it was kind of working for me for a period of time. Interestingly, I do want to suggest that while I did move into that season of life thinking that accomplishing some kind of physical idea was going to help me connect with people, and in some ways it did, also in some ways it didn't, because it also served, depending on the crowd and who I was interacting with, in some ways it became a barrier because of their perception of me or projections onto me, where they couldn't see the whole truth of who I am because they were too focused on the physicality. So I just want to put that out there. I did get a lot of positive feedback, but it also made it where I didn't connect with some people. So that was the first season. Really good season. But then after that, I started having some inner spiritual and emotional experiences, and I started to feel less and less satisfied with what was going on with me externally. That season of life was kind of getting old. I was feeling like something was missing, and I wasn't sure what it was. So I started to withdraw a little bit and kind of refocus. But also during that time, I started to deal with some pretty challenging relationship dynamics and some external situations that led to some pretty severe emotional stress and strain that I hadn't dealt with before. And so it was a new season, like I said, and a completely different dynamic from the one before. During that time, I was still working out, and I was still fairly careful with my diet, although I had started to become a bit more indulgent and a little bit loose, and I started to work out a little bit less, to be honest. And so all of a sudden, and I'm also getting a bit older during this time, so all of a sudden I start to observe that my inner fat boy is making an external appearance. And I kind of saw that was happening, And I was in a weird headspace, as I said, emotionally. So I didn't really resist it. I actually remember thinking at one point, maybe I'll work better as a fat boy. Fat boys give better hugs. In a lot of ways, they're more like culturally accepted in a way, or at least that's the perception that I had. More normal, like more mainstream. Maybe it's okay if I'm more like, why do I have to be? I don't want to stand out. I just want to wear my hoodie and be in the back corner of the room, that kind of thing. So there's a level of self-awareness that I'm admitting here that probably is wrapped up in the vanity that I experienced in that earlier phase. But I was okay with the fat boy for a while. And there are a couple of other things I want to add to that, which I've learned as a result of my experience during that time, that could be helpful for a lot of people. Number one is that your mood or your attitude is so important, specifically relative to how your body takes in what you give it. So if you're critical of what you're consuming, you're adding that layer of negative energy to the food, and you're actually digesting the negative energy along with whatever you're nourishing your body with. So if I'm going to ground this in a real way, if you're eating broccoli, but your attitude about it is sour, you're actually taking in soured broccoli. And then on the flip side of that, if you're eating a Snickers bar, but you're in a really high vibrational emotional space, that Snickers bar can nourish you in beautiful ways that you can't possibly imagine. So I want to say this because in my experience, it's been absolutely true. Like during the time when I was super fit and working out constantly, honestly, I could have eaten anything. And in some cases during that time, I did. And it didn't really make much of a difference. My body was taking it in the mood and the attitude that I was in at the moment. And so it was nourishing me. And then as I moved into that phase where I was emotionally stressed out and dealing with a bunch of stuff, it mattered less how much I was eating or what I was eating, and more that I was in a low emotional place. I was getting fat with emotions. And there's another aspect to this dynamic that's worth noting, and I've learned about this through the human design system. So I just want to mention it to you for you to consider it and see if you see evidence of it in your experience. But if you're dealing with a lot of emotional stuff and you are a highly sensitive person or subject to emotional sensitivity or empathic to a degree about the emotional situation in your environment, your body may actually put more weight on you, especially around your gut, to protect you from that energy. It's like insulating you. So just be cognizant of that. And I guess a takeaway from it for me during my fat boy phase was, maybe I need to honor this. Like my body is wanting to protect me from all of this stress and stuff that I'm dealing with. And so I kind of, as I said, I kind of embraced that phase of life. It was interesting to go from fit to fat, from ripped to chunky, and experience both sides of that coin. I'm actually really glad that I did it. But now I'm expressing the next phase, which is that after I've cleared some of the emotional stuff that I had been dealing with, and starting to feel a little bit more vibrant and alive again, I've done a lot of resting and recuperating and recharging and regenerating. I am being reminded, my body is reminding me that it wants to move. And I'm pointing that out because I think we all need to honor how our bodies are designed. I think every body is unique, and there's no one-size-fits-all diet or exercise regimen, and there's no one-size-fits-all diet that will work for you during all the seasons of life. So the takeaway from me after experiencing both sides of that fit and fat coin is that it's important that we cultivate an awareness of how our body wants to move or not move, what our body is asking for us to give it for nourishment. Like, for example, my fried bread scenario. Like, I'm having so much fun eating this fried bread. I may not always need to eat the fried bread, but right now that's what my body's asking for, and that's what I'm giving it. And then this third phase has reminded me, like, I don't work as well if I don't move my body. I've got to run, and I've got to be on the treadmill in addition to my workout. And maybe part of that is getting older. I don't know, but I'm in a phase of equilibrium and kind of the middle path between the two more extreme phases of my relationship with my physicality. And so I'm honoring that phase. I hope you can see actually that I've honored each phase. They've each had their place. And so maybe another takeaway that I'm just realizing is not to get caught in expecting one phase to be the way it's always going to be. Like, always be checking in again with yourself. Where am I right now? What is my body wanting? How do I feel in my body? You know, one thing I'll say is I feel better now in my body in this sort of middle, like I'm not super chunky, but I'm also not super ripped, but I'm giving my body what it's asking for, and my body, I feel good in my body. And I may actually feel better now than I did when I was more ripped, and I was kind of denying myself the carbs. I don't know. Just food for thought. And so going forward, I'm not going to say that I'm never going to want to go back to the every day in the gym, like super low carb, super fit and ripped. Maybe there will be another season of that. I'll know it when I feel it. I'm also not going to say that I may not have another phase of inner fat boy coming out and experiencing the middle age spread. That phrase used to make me cringe, but now it doesn't so much anymore. But I think going forward, I will always be in a space of honoring what my body's needing, giving it what it's asking for, respecting it, loving it, cultivating and keeping that awareness of it. Because I've had the experience of the up and down and reflected on sort of the spirituality of physicality, I want to make sure that I shared that experience with you, because we all need to remember that we are physical beings, but we're also spiritual beings, and we're emotional beings. And these different aspects of who we are all interrelated. And nourishment happens on so many different levels: physical nourishment, spiritual nourishment, mental nourishment. And so maybe the big takeaway, the last takeaway that I have is just making sure that you're honoring all of those different aspects of who you are and cultivating that awareness. Honor your fat boy phase, or your skinny phase, or whatever phase you're in. Let me know if you have any thoughts or follow-ups or ideas or anecdotes about this one, the phases of life. I am appreciating some of the recent suggestions and interactions that I've experienced on the channel. Thank you so much for joining me for these. I feel like this one was a bit rambly, but I'm again trying to not rely on my notes as much as I used to. I know I can write, but getting in front of a camera and sharing something personal on the fly like this is something that I am inspired to cultivate, so I'm giving it a try. Okay, so that's it, I think, for this one. Thanks again for joining me. This has been episode 26 of the LightCast. I'm Jared Treadway, sending you love and light until we meet next time. See you then.